Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN WhatIf 2.0, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was Raised Like Sasuke? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Itachi's eyes were a dull gray. The noises of their battle sent a few last echoes through the place before dying out, leaving only Sasuke and his heaving breaths. Sasuke didn't even feel the elation he had always thought he would have. He could only feel the leftover adrenaline from the battle along with the troubles of chakra exhaustion. His eyes were getting too heavy for their own good, and it wouldn't bring anything useful for him if he dropped dead right now. What would Suigetsu, Karin, and Yugo do without him? It wasn't as if he created the team out of spite. But the world loved to bring torture onto Sasuke. He never had peace, Sasuke realized, except maybe when he was a child. But his days had turned into a nightmare in an instant because of Itachi. And finally his brother was lying on the ground, defeated. He was supposed to be happy now. He vaguely heard the yells of Karin's worried cries along with Suigetsu's and Yugo's, and he attempted to reply back to them, but nothing more than a groan escaped his lips. He felt the soothing feeling of Karin healing him, but it was too late to stop the blackness that covered his eyes. The faint noises of someone shuffling around him instantly caused him to wake, his senses polished with the years of training at Konoha and with Orochimaru. His eyes adjusted to the bright light from the window to see a woman with pure white hair, folding laundry fresh from the dryer. Sasuke tried to call out to ask who she was, but only a high-pitched and faint cry escaped. Fear then struck him with the absence of chakra flowing throughout his body, causing him to yell louder. She immediately ran over to him, and he realized how much bigger she was than him. He had never been such a small person, as he had been rather tall for children his age. But looking down at his own self, he could see small fingers and chubby hands of not him, but those of a toddler. Panic rose from his lungs and pathetic crying noises escaped him with foreign tears threatening to spill from his eyes. But the comforting voice of the white-haired lady was starting to have a nearly hypnotizing effect, and Sasuke allowed himself to be lulled into sleep, into a sense of peace he hadn't felt for many years. He found out a lot of things in the next few weeks. His name was Shuto Todoroki, a toddler, defenseless. But just like Sasuke's childhood, the days as a toddler were calm. He occasionally saw his siblings, Fuyumi, Natsuo, and Tuya. His father was Enji Todoroki, and his mother was Rei Todoroki. They were generally kind, although he could sense that they were hiding things. But this was normal, as everyone had their secrets. Sasuke's clan certainly had many secrets. It was so strange, life is so peaceful. He was fed and taken cared for, carried, and loved by this family. It was almost too easy, pretending to be Shuto Todoroki and not Sasuke. Of course, the world loved to torture Sasuke. He remembered that he was being held by his mother when he saw Tuya Todoroki's true face, illuminated with the hot blue fire he emitted from his hands. And at that moment, Sasuke could only see Itachi and the Tsukuyomi of his clan's deaths. He was scared, so scared. But he didn't feel fear of Tuya. He only wished that this time, instead of killing everyone in their clan and sparing him, that Tuya would kill him first so that he wouldn't ever have to see the severed heads and blood of his family. It was almost a shame that this family came to his rescue, pulling Tuya away from Sasuke. In Sasuke's eyes, Tuya was like Itachi, except that this time, he was merely one of the clan members who would die at his brother's hands. It was frightening to think that he could have died on that fateful day. Sasuke was 4 years old when he first looked into a mirror properly. Before, he had been too cowardly, too fearful of how he would now look in a new body in a foreign world where he didn't have the safety and reliance on his jutsu and chakra and Sharingan. What he saw wasn't as bad as he thought it would be, however. In ways, he could see the person Shuto Todoroki was supposed to be, with dual-colored hair and heterochromatic eyes. But to his relief, his eyes still looked like they were Sasuke's. They weren't the black and red they should have been, the Sharingan he had been so familiar with, but he had one gray eye and the other a bright blue. He still knew that these eyes were his own. Sasuke's. No child's eyes would look just as he did, filled with murky visions and memories a child should not yet have. Should never have. He was still 4 when he felt a strange coldness on his right side and hotness on his left. He could see smoke rising from his left arm with a sheen of frost overlapping his right. He knew this was the special power most people in this world had. The same as his mother who had her ice, his father who had his flames, unique from person to person. And now he had his own. His father's demeanor changed. If before, he regarded Sasuke with caution and with the air of an awkward and inexperienced father, he was now more confident and far more aggressive. His brothers stopped going to the room he had always trained with their father in, and Sasuke went instead. The fire from his father hurt, but it gave him a sense of familiarity from the fireball jutsu he had struggled to learn when he was 5 that burnt his throat raw. It was almost comforting. It was too easy to fall into this routine again, of training non-stop for his goals. Except that there is no Itachi in this world. Without a goal, Sasuke knew his training wouldn't be quite as effective. He convinced himself that it was a good thing that his father gave Sasuke a goal. To become a hero, to defeat the famed All Might. He could do that. If Sasuke still had his Sharingan and his Chidori, it would be so much easier in this world for Sasuke Shudo Todoroki to become the #1 hero. It would be so easy to please this father. Sasuke wanted the praise. Sasuke felt as if he was 6 again, completely new to his powers at the level of 0. The fire was easier to manipulate than his ice, but the foreignness of the ice gave him so much potential to unlock. Training overrode everything in his life again, surprising and priding this father every day with the rapid development he made. Maybe he really would be able to become the #1 hero even without Sharingan. Maybe this time, he would live up to become an amazing shinobi hero. One day, Tuya is gone, his father said. Maybe Tuya was more different from Itachi, Sasuke thought. Itachi had killed everyone around him, but Tuya killed himself instead. The harshness of training increased tenfold. He didn't remember quite what age he was when his mother snapped. His mother had come to his aid whenever the training was going overboard, no matter how much he told her that he was fine, that he liked the training, that training was okay. Sasuke was okay with training, but his mother wasn't. He felt the boiling water on his eye, and it hurt in a different way than training did. The training was relieving in a twisted sense. This pain just hurt. Tuya was kind of like Itachi, and maybe his mother was too. She screamed that she's sorry, and Sasuke screamed along with her, unsure if he should forgive her. He could almost feel Sharingan in his eyes again, whirling rapidly, but it must have been pure coincidence. Eventually, he did forgive her because she wasn't Itachi, and she was sorry. Itachi didn't feel sorry, did he? Sasuke wondered if he could have ever forgiven or forgotten Itachi instead of killing him, pursuing revenge. He was now 15 years old, standing in front of UA, where he was supposed to become a hero. He wasn't sure if it was really a choice he had ever had, but he supposed he was content enough with this life. Sasuke wasn't sure if he wanted to be called Sasuke anymore. Being Shudo Todoroki seemed much easier, even with the burned scar over his eye and hospitalized mother and dead brother. It was easier though. It was easier knowing that Tuya was dead of his own volition, and his mother safe in a hospital. That they were not dead because someone had ripped the life out of them forcefully. At the entrance there was a meek green-haired boy that was getting yelled at by a blonde with spiky hair. There was also a tall black-haired girl that greeted him because they were both recommended students. He felt bad for not remembering her. There was a boy with glasses that wildly moved his arm around, and a girl with short brown hair that seemed to already know the green-haired boy. Sasuke could only be glad that he wasn't on the end of a potential crush this time. He had been in the body of Shudo for quite some time. He had the same hair, the same body, the same quirk. He learned that this boy should have had all to himself. Sasuke realized he was mostly Shudo, too used to being a Todoroki instead of an Uchiha, although he wondered if there was much difference between the two. But his eyes always seemed to be those of Sasuke Uchiha, and he accepted that never truly forget Konoha, Team 7, and Team Taka, even if he wasn't really Sasuke anymore. The sky is filled with too many crows and too few clouds. Endeavor had laughed pridefully the day his acceptance to the UA had come, telling him that he knew Shudo would have passed all along, and had been in a good enough mood to allow Todoroki to spend the day for himself. The sky in the city was without a cloud, and the day seemed far too perfect, making Todoroki uncomfortable. He knew that happy days didn't just appear without any repercussions to happen in the future. But just for today, maybe he could indulge himself. He passed by a few vendors with onigiri and tomatoes, suppressing the urge to buy them before giving in and buying one onigiri. If there was one thing his father had, it was money. While eating, he heard a large crash from the area behind him, instinctively causing him to WHP around on his toes. He could see someone running away with a bright red bag with a hero pursuing them right on their heels. The crowds were cheering on Kamui Woods, who Todoroki had seen a few times before. The hero was capable and would easily take care of this mess, so he turned away from the chaos. Everyone gasped and watched as the robber was taken down by a new imposing hero, a lady with a quirk that made her as large as the buildings. She smiled as she apprehended the villain, obnoxiously posing for the cameras. Todoroki snorted, as if a simple robber was anything to make such a fuss about. From the corner of his eye, he could see the large crowd of people watching, with a green-haired boy wildly scribbling in his notebook next to a man who was talking to him excitedly. Todoroki's phone rang, with the caller ID labeled father in bright white letters. Half reluctant, he accepted the call. "You're going to UA soon for the tour, right, Shudo?" "Yes, father," he replied, monotonous. "Since it's your first day, I'll be taking you to the UA personally. You remember that I only expect the best from you, right?" He muttered a grunt of assent before saying goodbye and hanging up. He didn't need Endeavor to remind him that he needed to be the best anymore. He put that pressure on himself all the time anyway. A month or two later, he realized he really was going to attend UA. Todoroki prided himself on being supremely observant even without Sharingan in his eyes. He could clearly see the looks of some of the other UA students gave him at the gates of the academy. Some were polite, probably people who knew he was the son of Endeavor, number 2 of the heroes, but were too afraid to come talk to him firsthand. Some were filled with curiosity about his burn scar or maybe his two-toned hair. He had to admit, those were his two most distinctive features that everyone seemed to notice first. The blonde, spiky-haired guy reminded Todoroki of Naruto, constantly going around causing trouble for attention. It was annoying, but the nostalgia filled him with a strange fondness for the boy. He turned to remember the green-haired boy at the scene a few weeks ago, the one who had written something down furiously in a notebook. "Kachin, please not here right now." "What the F did you say to me, Deku?" I promise I'll explain later. Please calm down." Kachin. Was that his name? It probably was a nickname just like Deku. These two had to be familiar with each other if they were comfortable enough to call each other that. It was endearing. Maybe this time he could graduate and carry on with being a shinobi hero without ever leaving. It was comforting to think about, the prospect of a life with stability. Kachin turned around to look straight at Todoroki, both boys staring each other down without flinching or backing away. "What are you looking at, candy cane?" Todoroki snorted. That was a new one. Then again, he never really had any nicknames from other people his age, as he had been homeschooled his entire life. "What's it to you, Kachin?" The boy's face angrily twisted even further, stomping toward him while rolling up his cuffs. "Okay, students, step inside with me, please." A loud man with the strangest sunglasses waved his arms, beckoning the new students all inside. His voice hurt Todoroki's ears. No man's voice should be able to do that. Maybe it was his quirk. It seemed to have great offensive attacks on his ears, which would be amazing against villains but terrible against students. The man turned and grinned widely right at Todoroki, causing him to start. He couldn't have a mind-reading quirk, could he? "I'm the hero present, Mike, if any of you guys was wondering." The man grinned, then opened up his arms at the UA for a dramatic effect. "Welcome, new students, to the UA." The inside of the huge building was even more impressive than the outside. The place was so neat and clean, the uniforms crisp. It was evident that the UA was one of the most prestigious schools out there. Todoroki mentally slapped himself for not paying attention to the tour around the school. It would have been a nice treat to see on that day. He was directed to classroom 1A, standing around awkwardly with the rest of his classmates who conversed with each other. It was good that nobody was following him around like Naruto and Sakura. Maybe he would be able to graduate without anyone annoying him. Hello, Todoroki-kun. What do you think of UA so far? He turned to see that it was the black-haired girl who might have temporarily greeted him at the gates, although he didn't really remember. Todoroki didn't know how she seemed to know his name, even though he had never introduced himself. He raised an eyebrow. Have I seen you before? She scratched her head a little, perhaps embarrassed. Ah, I'm Momo Yaoyorozu, and I'm pleased to be your classmate. I hope we'll get along. He sent back a little nod. He hoped she wasn't anything like Sakura and Ino were, although she naturally seemed more calm and quiet. A small hope, but he clung to it anyway. 30 minutes had passed, rendering even most of the talkative. Students quiet, standing around for their teacher. Some of them seemed ready to call it a day and leave for the dorms or training when a low voice spoke to them. Children, meet me out back in the field. They all turned around to be met with a man in a yellow sleeping bag with heavy eye bags and dry eyes. Todoroki couldn't help but sigh. The laziness and lateness that this man showcased reminded him of Kakashi, his lazy sensei who never seemed to want to arrive remotely on time. Everyone seemed just as confused as Todoroki, grudgingly following the man's instructions. Out at the field, there were a few markers on the ground. Were they starting training right away? Now, we will be doing a quirk apprehension test. Todoroki tuned the man's words out. It was most likely a series of tests depending on range, power, and defense. He knew that he had practiced days and nights for this since his quirk had appeared. He would do fine. And the last place will be expelled. He could feel an electric static go through everyone around him. Todoroki was sure that he wouldn't be expelled. He was perfectly confident in his abilities he had honed for a long time. Some other students seemed less sure of themselves though, especially the green-haired boy. His face was starting to turn a shade similar to his hair, causing Todoroki to scoot away from him, albeit not so discreetly. Todoroki wanted to snort out loud when their teacher, whose name was Aizawa, told them that the expelled portion of the test was just a trick to bring the best out of all of them. The looks on his classmates' faces were amusing. Aizawa had a good tactic. He had gotten second, right below Yaoyorozu. He had been so used to being first all the time at the academy that this irked him a bit more than it should have. The exercise had been a good marker though, to evaluate where he stood in the class. The rest of his classmates were congratulating each other while the boy, who he learned was named Bakugo, was fighting with Midoriya again, yelling something about his quirk. While it was somewhat endearing at first, it was now just getting on his nerves. He wasn't here to get all buddy-buddy with his classmates. He got up and turned to leave. It was uncomfortable, with the sudden hush and the prickly feeling of 21 pairs of eyes from his classmate and teacher following him. It was a relief when he turned the corner, unable to feel their eyes on him anymore. The cafeteria was large. Back in Konoha, they didn't have these things at the academy, and the children were expected to go home to their families to take care of themselves, leaving orphans like Naruto and himself utterly alone. He took up the soba this time. The lunchroom was full, with too many people and too many noises for him to focus on anything. He instead walked right out, then up the stairs to the rooftop. The fresh air from the outside calmed him, with no noises except the light breeze that brushed his skin. The soba brought out a happy feeling inside him. Maybe Shudo Todoroki would have liked soba. Todoroki raised his left side, forming a small ball of fire in his palm. If he was still Sasuke, he could have chosen for a ball of lightning to form, similar to Kaminari's quirk. It was a disappointment that he didn't even have his Sharingan, a distinctive figure of the Uchiha. But he supposed that he was now a Todoroki, labeled by his father's destructive firepower. He had both traits of his mother and father, gifted twice. He would use these gifts well to defeat his adversaries in his class and become the #1 hero. It wasn't going to be easy getting the #1 position in this world, unlike the academy. Everyone was far closer in power, himself included, and there was more than just strength in becoming a hero. He saw a crow fly by and flinched. Wrapping up his trash, he shook his head once to get the panicked thoughts out of his head. His breaths start to heave, causing small teardrops to escape the sides of his eyes. He wasn't bound by Itachi anymore. He had new goals and he needed to focus on them. His name is Shuto Todoroki. He is not an Uchiha any longer. His name is Shuto Todoroki. He is not an Uchiha any longer. His name is Shuto Todoroki. He is not Sasuke any longer. His formerly heaving breath started to calm until he was only a sniffing mess. Pathetic. He was supposed to be strong. He was a shinobi who trained under Orochimaru, killed Itachi, and was now one of the most promising heroes in training in a prestigious school. He was Shuto Todoroki, with a half-hot, half-cold quirk with extreme proficiency with both sides, and was scarily skilled with all types of weaponry. His martial arts skills were nearly unrivaled even by the best pro heroes, and he was powerful enough to make the number 2 of heroes, Endeavor, proud of him. He sighed. His face was dirty, and he didn't want to go back to class as a sniveling mess, a showcase of his weakness. Luckily, the nearest bathroom was empty and he turned on the water and made it as cold as possible to help lessen the redding in his face. The mirror was clean and unblemished, perfectly reflecting his scarred appearance. His body was no doubt Shuto Todoroki, but his eyes still couldn't seem to let go of Sasuke Uchiha. Pathetic, he thought once more. Before leaving the bathroom, the faucet squeezed tightly shut. He should have known that he wouldn't be able to avoid his classmates forever. The entire lot of them were too talkative, too friendly, too intrusive to sum it up. Kirishima, who had the same shark-like teeth as Suigetsu and similarly seemed to keep talking to him, calling him manly every 2 seconds. For a while, Todoroki had been interested in Kaminari's quirk for a while, but after he learned that trying to replicate Chidori would fry Kaminari's brain, he started to tune everything they said. Todoroki? Hello. He blinked before seeing the two wildly waving their arms in front of his face. Did we bore you? We can talk about something else. Kirishima said, looking at him with wide eyes. Kaminari nodded vigorously in assent, staring Todoroki so intensely it felt as if he was looking straight into his soul. It was fairly uncomfortable. Maybe you're not interested in hero rankings? Kaminari asked. So that's what they were talking about. Todoroki shrugged his shoulders before looking away, moving his focus to the window. They waited for him to continue, but after it became evident that Todoroki wasn't going to continue, they went back to their conversation. I wonder when we're going to have some real training? We've just been attending classes like middle school. Yeah, aren't we here to be heroes? Hopefully, we do something with our quirks soon. I'm dying to see a better representation of everyone in our class. From behind Todoroki, he heard a condescending scoff. Already sizing up your enemies, are you? The three turned to look at a boy that didn't seem to be in their class. He looked down on them, smiling the same disturbing smile. Todoroki wanted to get away from him as soon as possible. Someone like that only made trouble. I'm Nito Minoma, from Class 1B. You're Class 1A, right? I guess that makes us rivals. He then twirled once for maximum effect. We'll see which hero course class really is superior. I'm sure we'll find that out soon enough at the sports festival. Minoma's eyes looked over each of them once, lingering on Todoroki for perhaps a second more before smiling again. Look down on us, and it'll be a mistake on your part. Minoma giggled, which started to turn into hysterical laughter that started to quiet the entire classroom before a girl with orange hair whacked him right on the head. Todoroki snorted out loud, much to the chagrin of the guy. Sorry for the trouble he's caused you, she said, tugging the boy outside the classroom by the ear. Everyone seemed to let out a sigh of relief after he left. What an annoyance. Chatter started to come up again, starting to irritate Todoroki. He sighed before pulling out his headphones. Why didn't they have these back in Konoha when so many people would have needed them? The headphones clapped over his ears, instantly canceling out most of the noise from the classroom. The silence filled up his head, calming him instantly. Social interaction was occasionally the most difficult and exasperating thing in the world. He honestly deserved an award for putting up with everyone else. Today we'll be having a battle trial. All Might's always enthusiastic voice boomed, his large figure looming over all the students. You children will be breaking up into teams of 2, with 2 of you taking the role of villains, and the other 2 being heroes. It seemed like a fairly easy exercise. Todoroki's eyes flitted temporarily to Shuji, a boy whose quirk granted him the ability to grow different body parts. It would be useful in many situations here, But Todoroki already had a plan to go through. They wouldn't need teamwork for the time being. I feel like you should step out for this. Shuji blinked, as they had only just stepped into the building. He looked expectantly back at Todoroki for an explanation as to why. I can do this myself. Shuji looked at Todoroki long and hard before ultimately stepping out of the building. Now left with only the opposing team inside the building, he could do whatever he wanted. This is just an exercise, no need to cause too much damage, he reminded himself. They'd probably be angry at me if I destroyed everything anyway. Todoroki shifted his foot to cause an arc of ice to start freezing the building. They would most likely be frozen right where they stood, unable to move anywhere. Shuji stepped back inside, shivering a little. If he wanted to come along, he could come, Todoroki thought, although the cold would most likely have been painful, making no move to converse and stepped further inside the building. He came across Ojiro with the warhead behind him. He seemed to be trying to pull himself out of the ice, ready to fight them. Todoroki just shook his head and touched the warhead, claiming their victory. Good plan. Todoroki, Shuji said. Todoroki turned and just nodded assent. He then used his left side to melt the ice on Ojiro's feet. Shuji then used his quirk to bring them to Hagakure, who he successively melted out too. Oh, he's so strong, no wonder he's a recommendation. Yeah, he seems strong. Young Todoroki has successfully won the challenge with no harm driven to his teammate. That was a really cool move. Do you think he's the strongest in our class right now? Back in the monitoring room, Todoroki watched the boy named Bakugo and Midoriya go against each other. They were both being reckless, letting personal feelings get in the way of their mission. They should always have the mission first, as confrontations could always come later, which showed that they really didn't know even the basics. It was a good thing, though, that he could analyze their quirks with their elongated battle. Bakugo was certainly more well-practiced with his quirk. Midoriya seemed as if his quirk was recently developed, as Todoroki remembered his broken finger at their quirk apprehension test. However, Bakugo's recklessness and anger against Midoriya seemed to be clouding his judgment. From another monitor, everyone in the room could see that Uraraka was nearing their goal while Bakugo was distracted, bringing in a victory for their team. Todoroki couldn't help but look at Bakugo's destructive explosions and think of Naruto's Rasengan. Bakugo entered the waiting room again, seething madly. His anger issues seemed even worse than Naruto's. His eyes flicked up to Todoroki, both staring at each other in an impasse. Todoroki wasn't sure what emotion was flickering behind Bakugo's eyes, but it loosely seemed to be a mixture of anger and determination. Are you two okay? Todoroki looked up to see the entire class staring at him with wide and reverence-filled eyes. He really didn't know why this class seemed to look at him like that so much. Why would you think otherwise? He hadn't seen Kaminari quietly whisper to Shiro, who was next to him. He's the classic bad boy, isn't he? Do you think the girls will drop dead for him? Mr. Aizawa lead them all to an outside facility for some extra training with some other pro heroes. Todoroki could see a pro hero he vaguely recognized as 13 from Kaminari and Kirishima's talk with him earlier. All Might will be here later, Mr. Aizawa said. Midoriya seemed to be chanting All Might's name quietly under his breath. It had been a while since Todoroki had seen someone that looked up to someone that much. All Might was just another obstacle in his way before he could truly be the strongest. He had to be the strongest because he didn't ever want to be H. Suddenly, in the middle of 13's speech, a purple portal appeared right in front of them, instantly causing the students to raise their hackles. A man with dusty hair and hands all over his body emerged first along with a large troop of villains following him. Todoroki could have sworn that he could taste the fear seeping out of the other students. This place was supposed to be a school for children aspiring to be heroes, where they trained and slowly started to build up experience before they went out into the real world. So why the F were they already meeting villains? Not that this was a problem for Todoroki. A hero's life seemed awfully similar to a shinobi, which just kept him nice and comfortable. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for his fellow students who seemed terrified out of their wits. Scared and impulsive children who had just been allowed full usage of their quirk would be another liability for the professional heroes. It was best that they mainly stay back and assist their teachers instead of run in headfirst, which would most likely result in injury and possible death. It was unlucky that the rest of his classmates didn't possess the same brains as he did. They seemed determined to take down these villains even if they were horribly outnumbered and most likely weaker than the villains too. The Purple Mist Man was faster than them though. Warp gates opened up for each of them, teleporting some of them to a different location. Todoroki blinked as he ended up in a new location alone. Or maybe he wasn't alone. He could see two gloves floating in the air who he presumed was Hagakure, the invisible girl. He ignored her before turning to the thugs standing before him. He instantly raised his guards. Letting them in the middle of a battle was often a fatal decision. Hey, you UA students. Todoroki instantly shifted into a defensive state. At the moment, the villains were the ones attacking them. After a quick analysis of their power, he would either defeat them or stall for the pro-heroes. As he suspected, they immediately charged at them, causing a little Eep to escape Hagakure. However, both of them didn't back down and started defending. These villains weren't strong at all. He could probably beat them with just pure hand-to-hand combat if he wanted. However, time was gold at the moment. If this was a real villain attack, well, the faster he took them down the better. If there was a chance that this was actually not an attack but instead a very, very realistic test, it would still be better if he was fast. He raised his left arm to let out an arc of flames before remembering that he wasn't a shinobi, but instead a hero and was not supposed to kill. Honestly, killing was far easier than capturing people alive. But he supposed he had no choice unless he wanted to serve time in prison. He raised his right arm after lowering his left, instantly causing an arc of ice to cover all of the thugs. A few that hadn't been trapped continued their onslaught, but they were hopelessly weaker than he was. He easily had over 20 years of intense training and experience if he added his years together. He supposed in theory that ice would be just as easy to kill someone, but it was too late now to establish which side he was using. They all looked at him with fear in his eyes at being defeated so easily by a single child. He smirked a little at their terrified faces. That was really cool, Todoroki. He had almost forgotten Hagakure. He had kept her in the back of his mind to remember not to freeze her, but he must have gotten caught in the moment. She put her hand on his shoulder, immediately causing him to tense up. His shinobi-carved senses and brain were getting dull. He needed more practice. Todoroki would never be as strong as he had been when he had been Sasuke, but it definitely seemed like he was one of the stronger students in this world, which he counted as a win. Will you let go of me now? Hagakure noticeably seemed to rear back, even with only her gloves and boots showing. He looked at her once more before turning away. Their mission here was complete, so he needed to report back to the teachers, assuming that they were okay, along with the other students. Todoroki, I think you're going to make an awesome solo hero. He raised one eyebrow at the word solo. Well, you seem to like working alone, don't I? Anyway, you're so strong, you'll definitely become an awesome hero. A hero, Todoroki remembered. That was what he was here to become. It was a good and noble goal that he could most likely easily reach during his time at UA. He was probably one of the closest to reaching this goal between his classmates unless it turned out that one of them really was stronger than him. Albeit, a classic goal to achieve, wasn't it? Lunchtime was always a nuisance with some of his bolder classmates asking him to sit with them every single day. Every time he gently rejected them, although it was becoming more of an annoyance every day. Todoroki walked up to the rooftop to eat his food like any other day before being stopped by Midoriya. Todoroki-kun, you never seem to sit at the lunchroom with everyone else. Where do you go to eat? Somewhere quiet. Midoriya's eyes widened and nodded vigorously. Todoroki could almost hear the gears in his head whir rapidly before beaming at him. Okay, Todoroki-kun. Have a nice lunch. Todoroki stared at Midoriya, who bounded away as if he had something important to do. His classmates were not strange. Annoying was one thing, but they were no doubt eccentric. The rooftop was empty as always, bringing a kind familiarity to Todoroki. He chewed on his rice slowly, letting the light breeze muss his hair up lightly. A crow cawed, causing Todoroki to throw some of his rice at it, not to feed it, but to hopefully chase it away. The crows just had to come all the time to disturb his peace, didn't they? They were always watching him for some reason. Didn't Itachi have crows with him? While throwing the trash from his lunch away, the crows bothered him again, screeching and pecking at his already messy hair. Ugh, he muttered at the birds. At this rate, he wouldn't even be able to eat lunch up here anymore. A large cry awoke from a large hawk that suddenly swooped down, causing Todoroki to flinch. But instead of pestering him just like the crows did, the hawk flapped its large wings at the other birds surrounding Todoroki, causing them to flee. He couldn't help but look at it with wonder, and he couldn't help but see that the hawk, which had now perched on the railing of the rooftop, was looking at him too. He remembered his own hawk, who had been a decent companion. "Garuda," he murmured, holding out a tentative hand to it. It playfully nipped at his hand, pecking him a few times before bristling and flying away. "Still with me, ta." The door cautiously creaked open, instantly getting Todoroki's attention. Shiro stood there, who gave a sheepish smile. Lunch ended 20 minutes ago. Had he lost track of time? It was slightly embarrassing, the fact that he was so late to class that someone had to come up here to remind him. He lightly combed his hair with his fingers before following Shiro down the stairs. The walk with Shiro to class was quiet and awkward, with some attempts of converse between the two that eventually turned into a one-sided talk from Shiro. "You're definitely like the strongest in our class right now. Don't tell Bakugo, he would probably have a seizure before trying to kill me." Todoroki stared at the stairs in front of him. He probably had double the experience of everyone in the class, and all of his training had been very hardcore. On top of that, he had a very strong quirk. It would be strange if he wasn't the strongest. But he couldn't just be the strongest in the class, as that was a given. He needed to be stronger than that. "By the way, Mr. Aizawa asked me to get you, since you're usually the first one in the classroom and you never came this time. I think he waited for a while in case you maybe were just in the bathroom or something." Shiro slid the door open and stepped inside with Todoroki following him. Everyone turned to stare at them. Todoroki grudgingly realized he was getting used to stares from his classmates. Mr. Aizawa sighed before rubbing his fingers on his forehead as if he wanted to get rid of a pest in his skull. "Nice of you to join us, Todoroki. Please go sit down." Unbothered, Todoroki stepped forward to the back row right at his seat. They were learning some mathematics here. Academics weren't quite as important in the shinobi world, where learning to wield weapons and learn jutsus were far more important, but it seemed different here. Academics were nearly equally as important. Maybe if he had been a little younger, he would have strived to become number one of his class. Todoroki was positive he could reach that place, as it already wasn't very far out of his reach. At the moment, he could see Yaoyorozu writing, completely focused. He had no doubt that if he didn't try, she would definitely take number one in academics. Sasuke Todoroki wasn't dumb. He knew that if he worked just as hard as Yaoyorozu, he could most likely get outstanding grades. But at least he had another goal to reach for. "Hey BSTD, why'd you show up late today?" Bakugo said, while slamming his hand down on Todoroki's desk. It was a little sudden, but it didn't deter Todoroki. "Why do you want to know?" he replied, although Bakugo only seemed to scoff at the response. "You're seriously effed in the head. What's with your personality?" Todoroki glared right at him. Out of all people, what was Bakugo doing, commenting on his personality? He knew that it was unreasonable that someone like Bakugo was riling him up so much, but for some reason, he really didn't want to back out, especially when his opponent was Bakugo. "You're really annoying, aren't you?" He grabbed Todoroki by the scruff of his neck, causing a surge of anger to flow through his body. Who did Bakugo think he was? UFING I'll beat your butt soon enough. Suddenly sent back to his childhood days of Naruto harassing him day and night, promising to beat Sasuke one day. Would he have surpassed him? Surely Naruto wouldn't have. He had always been last at the academy, while he had always been first. Todoroki smiled at Bakugo with a challenge between his lips. He knew it wasn't right, that they were teenagers that were supposed to be more mature than his 8-year-old self. He was trained to not rile up at any of these false challenges because in Konoha he had always been number one in his classes, leader of Team Taka, and the younger brother of Itachi who he had killed. He was supposed to be a deadly and perfectly accomplished fighter. He was supposed to have complete control over his mind. But maybe he wanted to be a little genin again, just for a little bit. Back in Konoha, he graduated from the academy at 12 years old. But here, he would graduate only when he was 18, finished with all the required courses. He technically was still a hero in training still, a child that could act a little petty at times. Who said rivalry would hurt him? Todoroki smiled, a little arrogantly at Bakugo. He glared in a condescending way before speaking. I would certainly like to see you try. Mr. Aizawa looked threateningly at their way, daring them to cause trouble in the classroom. The rest of their classmates still inside the room looked afraid yet intrigued at the prospect of a possible fight between two of their strongest. Bakugo blinked before starting to growl, making a small explosion appear in his hand before Mr. Aizawa came and shoved the two apart. Save this for the sports festival, problem children. He had forgotten about the sports festival. Well, wouldn't that be a good time to properly showcase his powers and show Bakugo how strong he really was? He was pretty sure that he, Todoroki Shudo, was not nervous about the sports festival. Hey, maybe he was lying. Sure, he was clearly the strongest in their class, assuming he had read everyone's levels correctly. Yaoyorozu and Azui seemingly had no complete weaknesses with their quirks, but he was confident that he would be able to win in a battle. They simply lacked raw power. Ida had immense speed, Kaminari had immense power, and most importantly, Bakugo had amazing proficiency with his quirk. Todoroki was surely still leagues above everyone, but it still irked him that someone who was technically half his age had such mastery over a quirk. It was annoying, just like how Naruto went from last in their class to be a close contender to him. It was strangely motivating. Not that he was ever going to admit that, especially to Bakugo. The speech was hilarious. I'm going to win this festival. Todoroki smirked and grudgingly clapped while the rest of the students booed. The first round was an obstacle race. Everyone gasped at the giant robots that stood, blocking their way. Why had they all frozen in fear, when they were supposed to be going onward, trying to win? Pitiful. Todoroki was far more proficient with his fire side as to his ice powers, most likely due to his affinity for fire back in Konoha. Would he make this an opportunity to practice his right side, or an opportunity to show his immense power with his left? Todoroki quickly reminded himself that he was going to get to the end and battle some students. If he kept his fiery side and his capabilities unknown, he would possess an advantage over all of them. From his right side, he launched a ray of ice, instantly freezing all of the robots, before using the heat from his left side to propel himself forward faster. The ice wouldn't keep the rest of the students down for long, and he could already hear the explosions of Bakugo above him. I'm going to beat you, you beastie. He really missed this feeling of exhilaration. It made him feel as if he really was alive again, just like how training had gotten him back to a familiar schedule when he had still been a child. He could see the finish line and he was still in first place. Then he heard a loud explosion from something other than Bakugo. He turned for a split second to see Midoriya, the boy who broke his finger fly by above them all. At this rate, Midoriya would be first instead. As if he would let that happen. He instantly released bouts of cold and hot air to propel himself forward faster and faster. Midoriya was ahead but by barely. Todoroki reached out as far as possible with his leg to cross the finish line an instant before Midoriya, who came in second. Bakugo roared before he crossed it too, making him third place. Todoroki smirked, looking back at the other two who were breathing hard. Todoroki was off to a good start. Next was the cavalry battle. Theoretically, if they went off of pure strength, Bakugo and Midoriya would be good teammates. However, Todoroki didn't know Midoriya's quirk well enough to work with him, and well, Bakugo was most definitely not going to work with him. People seemed to eye him a little warily. They knew he had an amazing quirk, but the 1,000,000 points on his head seemed to deter most people. Yaoyorozu stepped forward to Todoroki, placing a hand over her heart. Todoroki, I would be honored if I could be in the same team as you. Todoroki nodded curtly, allowing Yaoyorozu to join his team. Successively, Kaminari came, looking a little unconfident. Hey, Todoroki. Could I join your team? He nodded for Kaminari too, whose face seemed to brighter at his answer. Their last member, Ida, bowed deeply before asking to join their team. Todoroki could feel a few pairs of eyes buzzing into his back, and turned around to see Midoriya, Bakugo, and even Monoma staring right at him, with the intention to defeat him. Todoroki stared back, before smirking. He was going to win this thing. His team only needed the 1 million point headband they had right now to win by an overwhelming number, so they decided to stay on the absolute defense. Everyone would most likely charge right at them right away. Todoroki stretched his left arm in the possibility that he would have to use his fire, although it was unlikely. Yaoyorozu got ready to create a shield, and Kaminari charged up a little bit. Ida would be the base for their speed if they ever got cornered. Todoroki would lead this team to victory. The whistle blew, signaling the beginning of the battle. Immediately, a few teams dashed forward to try and take out his team, although some people avoided him, perhaps due to fear that their points would successively be stolen instead. Todoroki could see Midoriya's teammate, Tokoyami, unleash Dark Shadow to try and take him out. With his right hand, Todoroki created two thin, flat sheets of ice, then positioned them so that the light from the sun would fall directly onto the Dark Shadow's head. It screeched before retreating. Midoriya looked at him very intently, causing Todoroki to wonder if they had ever clashed before to give Midoriya such a strong feeling toward him. Maybe it was just the spur of the battle. An annoying pair of vines reached out for some of his headbands, but he easily created a piece of ice that resembled a kunai, throwing it to cut the vine into half. The remaining half of the vine slipped back, while Kaminari looked that way to make sure it wasn't. Coming back, Mineta threw a few of his grape orbs at his team, but Todoroki easily created ice shards to knock them to a different place in midair. Everyone seemed to grow a little more frustrated at how none of their attacks seemed to be closing in on Todoroki. Kaminari slowed for a split second, staring at another team. Maybe Kaminari was just trying to get a look at the Vine Girl. Todoroki smacked Kaminari on his head, who yelped before getting back on track. He could see Midoriya whisper something to his teammates, glancing at Todoroki only once, but that was all he needed to get ready for whatever attack Midoriya was trying to plot against him. They charged towards his left side. Perhaps they were thinking that he wasn't going to use his flames. Todoroki had wanted to leave them a surprise, but if it came to it, he would use them. He threateningly elicited a quick taste of his flames, daring them to come closer. Tokoyami grimaced, most likely due to the fact that his dark shadow would cower from those flames. Midoriya's face was conflicting, his teammates slowing down and rethinking, and Todoroki sent back a dangerous little smile. "Hey Todoroki, wanna be a little greedy?" Todoroki looked down at Kaminari for a moment before looking back up to see if any attacks were coming in. "What do you mean, a little greedy?" Kaminari quickly whispered something to Yaoyorozu, who nodded and started to make a blanket and a grappling hook. "I'll shock everyone, and you can use Yaoyorozu's device to get even more headbands." He raises an eyebrow, unimpressed. They already had a large lead against everyone, but his teammates seemed to already be getting ready to do what Kaminari wishes. Todoroki grudgingly got under the blanket, carefully balancing on Yaoyorozu and Ida's shoulders. "Ha, take this." Through the blanket that protected him and his teammates from Kaminari's electricity, he could vaguely see everyone inside the arena getting shocked. Yaoyorozu handed each of them a grappling hook and threw off the blanket. During the few seconds everyone was shocked, his team wasted no time in grabbing headbands. Todoroki whacked Monoma on the head as he stole their 200-pointer. Team Todoroki is on a roll. They have the 1 million point headband and an extra 1150 points. Everyone was desperate, and they seemed to realize that Todoroki's team might have been too strong of an opponent before going after the other, hopefully, weaker teams. His team was first, Midoriya was second, Tetsutetsu's team third, and Shinsu's team as fourth. Bakugo seemed angry at this prospect and a little nervous at the prospect of losing. Todoroki needed Bakugo to advance to the next round. Bakugo turned to Todoroki's team, desperately blasting at him for the 1 million point headband. 10 seconds. Bakugo's eyes widened. It was going to be too late. Todoroki knew he could keep up the defensive for 10 more seconds, even if it was a little battering. But if Bakugo didn't advance, who would he fight in the last battle? Todoroki slowly reached up to his forehead and tugged off the 205-pointer. The headband lied limply in his hand, wanting to find its place on someone's head. Todoroki reached out to Bakugo's spiky hair, carefully placing it on his head. Bakugo's teammates stared at him, dumbfounded at what Todoroki had just done. "Come on, Bakugo. Didn't you say you'd beat me?" It was truly worth it to see Bakugo's incredulous face. Time. Everything abruptly stopped as everyone simultaneously looked up to see the scores. In first place, Team Todoroki, with 1,900,000 points. His team cheered wildly at the large margin between the other teams and their score. In second place, Team Midoriya, with 615 points. Midoriya's team screamed, ecstatic that they were able to advance. Midoriya looked at Todoroki once, before turning to his teammates and celebrating with them. In third place, Team Shinso, with 510 points. Hadn't Tetsutetsu's team had been third a while ago? Todoroki looked at Shinso for a moment before looking back at the screen. He could figure him out later. And in fourth place, Team Bakugo, with 500 points. Bakugo's team did cheer, although it was a little subdued. They kept glancing at Todoroki. He just stared right back at them until they eventually looked away. Angrily, Bakugo walked right up to him before grabbing him by the collar. "What the F, was that supposed to be half and half?" He shrugged. To be honest, he wasn't quite sure what had come over him either. "Where's your demeanor now, the one that told me that you'd beat my butt?" Bakugo blinked before grinning madly. "Oh, so you had your own plan, huh? Don't worry. I will FNG beat you. Here is who you guys are going against. These are the brackets." Everyone turned to look at their possible contenders. Todoroki searched the board for his name and who he was going against. Izuku Midoriya vs Hitoshi Shinso, Shudo Todoroki vs Hantasiro, Ibara Shiozaki vs Denki Kaminari, Tenya Ida vs Mei Hatsum, Ishido Mina vs Yuga Oyama, Fumikage Tokoyami vs Momo Yaoyorozu, Tetsutetsu Tetsutisu vs Eijiro Kirishima, Achiko Uraraka vs Katsuki Bakugo. Tsuruha? "Ah man, I'm up against Todoroki." Denki gave a look of pity to Siro, who seemed distressed that he was going against such a strong contender. "Man, just try your best, I guess. Sometimes, you can't avoid the inevitable." "Hey, you're supposed to be on my side." Bakugo blinked, looking at the brackets. He wasn't against the half and half BSTRD or Deku, but instead he was against Uraraka. Uraraka? A girl from his class gave a little eep while looking fearfully at Bakugo at the same time. So those two were against each other. Todoroki was sure that he would be able to beat Siro. He would also have to look closely at Midoriya and Shinsu's battle to see ways to counter their fighting styles. It was a shame that he wouldn't be up against Bakugo, unless they both made it to the end. "Hey Bakugo." Bakugo turned to squint at Todoroki, mildly confused as to why he was suddenly called out. "Are you sure you'll be able to make it to the end?" Bakugo blinked before a mound of annoyance rose in his lungs. Did he not believe that he, Katsuki Bakugo, could make it to the top? "Shut up, watch yourself instead. I'm going to get a complete victory over all of you all." The appealing adrenaline that surged in his muscles was amazing. Sasuke missed this feeling. The stadium was very, very large. Todoroki knew that this place was definitely more advanced technologically than Konoha, but it was still amazing to see how neat everything was here. He would have to watch Shinso and Midoriya very carefully. One of them would come against him, assuming that he won. Siro didn't seem very confident against him. If he had any tricks up his sleeve, Todoroki would imagine that Siro immediately unleashes his tape to get him out of bounds. However, Todoroki could just freeze himself to the ground or maybe even melt the plastic. Melting plastic wasn't very good for the environment, however. He would use ice to keep him centered, then freeze Siro, giving him his victory. Midnight, who was overseeing their entire match, whipped out her hand as the start signal. "Match start." Shinso immediately started to say something to Midoriya, even though he couldn't quite hear from up where he was watching. Midoriya suddenly stood up straight from the defensive position he had been in and started walking towards the edge of the arena. Was Shinso controlling him? There was no other possible way where Midoriya would walk out due to his own volition. Standing at the edge of the arena, Midoriya suddenly stopped. He trembled for a short while with Shinso seemingly shocked. If Shinso was going to be smart, he wasn't supposed to be wasting time right now. Perhaps he should have realized this, that it was inevitable that others lacked experience and practice, even if they had useful quirks. If you're going to be smart, get him out right now. Shinso blinked presumably at the sound of Todoroki's voice before running to push Midoriya out of bounds right as Midoriya tried to turn around back to Shinso. Todoroki blinked. Had he spoken too loudly? He and Shinso were very far away from each other. Midnight hooped before waved her hand around once more. The winner of the first match is Hitoshi Shinso. Todoroki had no idea what Shinso's quirk was, as he wasn't quite in his class. Even so, he could see that it wasn't really physical. Perhaps it was similar to a genjutsu, although Todoroki didn't know how it was casted onto the person. Shinso looked up to meet eyes with Todoroki for a few seconds before he turned, walking through the doors leading to outside the stadium. "Hey Todoroki, isn't it your match next with Shiro?" He shot up in his seat, eliciting a wave of slightly nervous laughter from his classmates. Todoroki had forgotten, to his embarrassment. He raced down the stairs to his entrance to the field to suddenly meet with his father, Endeavor. "Shudo, would you mind telling me why you haven't showcased your power with your flames? I know how good you are with both of your sides." Todoroki grimaced. He had never understood his father's obsession with his fire side as opposed to his ice one. If he had been born with both, wasn't he supposed to focus on both of them? "It's a tactic, father. You know how I'm more adept with my left side. I wanted to keep it a secret until a contender that I would have to use it against would appear. I have the advantage of surprise here." Endeavor blinked, seemingly thinking a little before slowly nodding. "I suppose if you show the world that you can do this much with only half of your power, they'll be thrilled to see what you can do with both sides." "Very well. You will be winning this." Todoroki nodded. He most definitely would be winning this. He could really perhaps start over. Make a perfect life filled with happiness instead of revenge. It sounded like an unreachable paradise, almost. Todoroki opened the door which lead out a creek. Shiro already stood on the other side, lackadaisically stretching his arms. He looked nervous but somehow determined at the same time. "We have Shudo Todoroki and Hanta Shiro of Class 1A. Both of them were ready at their positions, waiting for the signal. 3, 2, start." Shiro, who had seemed afraid in the beginning, didn't waste any time in trying to sweep Todoroki off his feet. However, he had predicted this, and ice at his feet kept him secured even though Shiro's tape that had wrapped one of his arms was constantly trying to pull him out of bounds. Todoroki poked the tape quickly to find that it was sticky. Touching it too much could lead to some problems. Instead, Todoroki created a kunai made of ice once more, similar to the one he made during the cavalry battle. He threw it with perfect accuracy, cutting the tape that bound his arm and forcing Shiro to duck down to dodge his attack. Now free from Shiro's tape, Todoroki let out a thin sheet of ice on the ground, causing Shiro to slip and fall. Then he created a 6-foot wall of ice that quickly pushed Shiro to the edge of the arena. Shiro, who had seemingly accepted his defeat, stopped struggling and allowed himself to be pushed out of bounds. The winner of this match is Shudo Todoroki. Shiro got up from out of bounds, scratching his head. "I guess I really didn't stand a chance against you. Nice fight though." Todoroki couldn't really understand why everyone seemed to have such good sportsmanship. If someone won, they won, and they didn't need to address that, especially if they had known that he had been stronger since the beginning. Maybe he was the weird one. He couldn't quite remember what everyone else's fights were like, other than Bakugo. The girl, Uraraka, had certainly put up an amazing fight. Todoroki couldn't help but somewhat feel conflicted between Bakugo and Uraraka winning, although Bakugo did win out in the end. He was disappointed to find out that his teammates in the cavalry battle, Momo and Kaminari, had lost against their opponents, although Ida had passed. Next up, Hitoshi Shinso from the General Education course, and Shudo Todoroki from our Heroics course. Todoroki glanced up at Shinso. His hair was similar to Aizawa. Did his power also lie in his eyes just like their teacher? He groaned, realized that he should have paid closer attention to his match, or maybe not have gotten Shinso to win. At least he had known exactly what Midoriya's quirk was like and how to effectively counter against it. Go! Todoroki quickly iced his feet in case he started to walk off like Midoriya did. However, even though Shinso was looking at him, he didn't feel a sudden urge to walk out of bounds. So his power wasn't in his eyes, were they? Why did you help me? Todoroki blinked, thinking. It was unfortunate that he didn't have an answer. He settled with a shrug to rile his opponent up before releasing a torrent of ice while Shinso looked angry. Why did you help me? Did you think I would be an easier contender? Todoroki didn't have any intel on Shinso, unlike Midoriya. Anyways, Shinso wasn't an easier contender, seeing how close he was to beating Midoriya. It would have yielded the same result anyway, whether Midoriya or Shinso had gone against him. The ice reached Shinso easily, rendering him unable to move. It seemed as if Shinso's quirk didn't give him any physical advantages. Shinso, can you move? Said Midnight. Shinso desperately scrabbled at the ice, but Todoroki walked forward, freezing it to even colder degrees with his right side. Shinso sighed, defeated just like Zero had been. No, I cannot move. A WHP was lashed, and the crowd went wild. Shuto Todoroki moves on to the next round. He reached with his left hand and carefully melted the ice, not too hot so that the water would give him burns. If he did, maybe Shinso and he could have matching scars? Well, why did you help me? Todoroki ignored him this time. Why was Shinso asking the same question? No, I'm not going to use my quirk on you. Reply. His quirk? Shinso's face emitted realization as he looked Todoroki straight in the eyes. Oh, so you didn't know? And you still beat me? Shinso turned and walked away with an air of finality, accepting his loss against Todoroki. At least Todoroki now knew that his quirk was activated when someone spoke to him or replied to his questions. Todoroki couldn't help but feel nauseous at the thought of a genjutsu. It seemed as if the last people going against each other were him and Ida along with Tokoyami and Bakugo. Ida would be unable to move very well if Todoroki simply froze his engines. And since Ida didn't possess any long-ranged attacks, it would be easy to get him once he got close. Tokoyami would be a strong contender against Bakugo, but in terms of power, Bakugo seemed to come out on top. So it eventually would work perfectly to be him and Bakugo in the final round. Todoroki turned to look up inside the stadium to see Bakugo grinning madly at him, as if he had just come to the same conclusion as Todoroki had. Shuto Todoroki, are you ready? He turned his head to see Midnight waving at him, waiting to start the match. He gave a terse nod, turning away from Bakugo and looking at Ida instead. This match is Shuto Todoroki and Tenya Ida from the Heroics course. Ida looked at him intently through his glasses and gave a little bow. Start! Instantly Ida used his engines to dash forward as fast as possible towards Todoroki. Ida swiped at him in an attempt to catch him and presumably throw him out of bounds. Todoroki ducked and slid underneath him before reaching out to freeze his engines. Ida dashed away to the edge of the arena in retreat while Todoroki waited for Ida to do something. Ida seemed to take this as a form of mockery, dashing forward again, unrelenting. However, it seemed that he didn't have a much higher speed to run at. Even with Todoroki's quirk that didn't give him many speed-related benefits, Todoroki could avoid Ida, with some difficulty. Maybe it was just his years of experience paying off. Todoroki once again ducked under Ida, which Ida had already expected, and took hold of the cloth around his shoulder. However, this time, while Ida had grabbed him and was starting to dash to throw him out of bounds, Todoroki lifted his hand onto his engines and froze them. Ida would have been much more distracted while running with Todoroki instead of actively defending against him. His engines froze, which then led to his entire body being encased with ice, rendering him unable to move. Tenya Ida is unable to move. Shuto Todoroki moves on to the next round. He stepped forward to help Ida get out of the ice, who nodded curtly in thanks before looking at a notification on his phone that had been in his pocket. A feeling of dread overcame Ida's face, causing him to leave the arena hurriedly, Todoroki soon following him outside. Who brought their phone in a fight like this? Right outside the arena, Tokoyami stood, ready for his match. Todoroki and Tokoyami's eyes locked for a moment before Tokoyami said anything. Your battle sense is very refined, Todoroki. Was there a particular way you polished this? Battle sense usually came down to two things. Training, which was the basics. You could create new moves or rehearse your basics. In the beginning, when you were young, this was most important. But simply knowing things would get you only so far. Once you started to truly apply them in situations, you would start to experience situations that could appear again. Your senses would remember these situations and apply basics necessarily. Although, there was no reason why he needed to share this with Tokoyami. No. Tokoyami didn't seem deterred by his short response and nodded. I'm not too sure if I can win against Bakugo, but no matter who comes out victorious, I believe you will eventually defeat us all. Your applications with your quirk are remarkable. Tokoyami opened the doors to the arena, in which Bakugo was already standing. Todoroki looked through the small window at the two until Midnight started the match. He trudged back up the stairs into the bleachers and sat right by Momo. She smiled at him without any special intent behind her eyes. You did amazing, Todoroki. I, myself, had frozen up when it had come to the real thing. But no matter where you are, you seem to excel in everything. Todoroki stared at Momo, who he momentarily thought Sakura was her instead. Momo wasn't really Sakura. He reminded himself, smacking himself on the head mentally. The last time Sasuke had properly seen her was when she was younger and much more immature. Perhaps Sakura would have also changed into someone similar to Momo. While Momo was smart, which he could see with her grades, she couldn't apply herself well. A large bang from the stadium caused Todoroki to look up from Momo back to the battle. Bakugo was winning, his light from the explosions seemingly weakening Dark Shadow greatly. But instead of looking at Tokoyami, Bakugo was staring at him instead. He was too far away for Todoroki to understand what he was saying, but from Tokoyami's indigent yell, it hadn't been pretty. One last explosion went off until Tokoyami gave up. Midnight lashed out her WHP, declaring Bakugo's victory. Katsuki Bakugo advances to the next round. We have our final two left, Todoroki and Bakugo from the heroics course. Everyone cheered in the stands, particularly his classmates, who screeched 2 times louder than anyone else in the crowd. The few people such as Kirishima and Siro who had the confidence to smack him on the back tried to lift him up onto their shoulders, which he vehemently declined, much to their chagrin. We will watch their match right after our recreation time. Todoroki didn't really care for this event, but reluctantly walked down with the rest of his classmates to participate. Halfway down though, Bakugo appeared, who had been coming back to the stands. Instantly, it seemed as if the air was 5 degrees colder, causing everyone but Bakugo and Todoroki to freeze. Hey, half and half. You better give me a good fight. With everything you've got, all right? I think that would be too dangerous on your behalf. Everyone's eyes turned to Todoroki in disbelief and awe. Bakugo scowled, exploding away a small portion of the wall. Don't think that I'm going to be a weak target. Bakugo walked past all of them, presumably towards the bathroom. Todoroki glanced at him before calling out one final time. What's your definition of weak? Am I the line you need to pass? This didn't seem to help as he yelled, with an explosive noise following right afterward. Momo looked at him worriedly. Todoroki, I know you're strong, but are you sure it's a good idea to rile up your opponents like that? He shrugged. Technically, if he wanted to, it could have worked as a tactic. People often created rash decisions when they were provoked. But in the case of Naruto Bakugo, stress would only make their plays even stronger. I can handle him just fine. Todoroki looked into Bakugo's eyes, who was looking crazily back at him. You better give me a good fight. It wasn't like Todoroki had anything better to do anyway, but he raised an eyebrow nevertheless, to hopefully rile Bakugo up. Midnight beamed down at them before grinning. We have our final round with Katsuki Bakugo and Shudo Todoroki from our heroics course. The stands cheered, relishing for a movie-worthy fight between their 2 top contenders. Todoroki would give them just that, along with his flames for his father. But the thrill of this fight was going to be his own and no one else's. Bakugo warmed up his hands and stretched his arms out while Todoroki followed suit. Start! Bakugo didn't waste any time in lunging forward with his explosions, instantly making Todoroki shift his legs to defend against him. Todoroki didn't really know how strong his explosions were, and he wanted to find out. He raised a shield of ice, which Bakugo easily broke through as he reached right for Todoroki. Todoroki ducked under him while grabbing at his leg to bring Bakugo down with him, which luckily was successful. He sneered at Todoroki, easily getting back on his feet. "What am I, too unworthy of your fancy attacks?" It wasn't really the case. Todoroki knew that his ice wasn't quite strong enough to hold against Bakugo. It wouldn't really do much. Maybe he really would have to use his flames this time. "Come on, aren't you supposed to be both ice and fire? Not going to make this fight flashy enough." For everyone. Todoroki glanced towards the audience. The crowds weren't quite booing, but they did seem desperate for some real action. Grudgingly coming up with a flashy move, Todoroki pressed his hand into the ground, causing large icy spikes to protrude from every inch of the ground, the temperature dropping rapidly while simultaneously forcing Bakugo to hover in the air with his explosions before he could get back down while avoiding these spikes. Momentarily, while Bakugo was distracted by the icy spikes, Todoroki released a wave of ice that was trying to knock Bakugo out of bounds. Wait, Bakugo wasn't in the air anymore. Those spikes are a little too dull to do any damage. Trashy distraction right there. Todoroki turned to see Bakugo right behind him, aiming his explosions in his face. Todoroki backflipped a few times to put some distance between him and Bakugo before ducking behind one of the icy spikes to avoid the blast. "You're not giving me a real fight, aren't you, Icy Hot?" He wasn't quite giving it his all. In the other battles, he never had needed to utilize much power behind his attacks. But just for this fight, Todoroki realized he really did need to put in more effort. At this rate, he would lose. Bakugo lunged forward again, trying to either knock him out or push him out of bounds. Todoroki's eyes flicked down for a moment to see that the out-of-bounds line was pretty close behind him. Bakugo lunged forward, coming close range because all he had seen of him so far were long-ranged attacks. But everyone in this arena, including Bakugo, didn't know how adept Todoroki was with hand-to-hand fighting. When Bakugo reached out to blast Todoroki again, Todoroki grabbed his arm before pivoting to make sure that Bakugo was over his shoulder. He flung Bakugo as hard as he could, even though he knew Bakugo could probably use his explosions to get right back in bounds. But that's where his own quirk would come into use. He would, for the first time, showcase something he had never shown the rest of his classmates before. "Is this good enough for you guys?" Flying through the air, Bakugo raised his hands and ready to maneuver his way back into the arena, but a bright blaze of light from the corner of his eye made him peek, just for a second. "You wanted me to use my flames, didn't you?" Bakugo's eyes widened as Todoroki, with half of him glowing in full glory with his flames that represented the Todoroki name. "Are you finally going to come at me with your all?" Todoroki flashed a bit of blue fire, testing out the temperatures while the left side of his shirt burned away. He would have to accommodate for that later. "How much can you truly withstand, Bakugo?" A wave of fire torpedoed its way to Bakugo's right side, causing him to angle his palms carefully to both get away from the flames to not set off any explosions while maneuvering back into the arena simultaneously. But Todoroki was observant, even without any eyes that held terrible power. "You're avoiding my fire with your palms specifically, aren't you?" Bakugo growled while Todoroki, to the gasps of many classmates, smirked right back at him. "Avoid this." Todoroki had never showcased his full potential with all of his skills, with his quirk, with his agility, with his ease to beat someone hand to hand. He wanted to show off just this once. After all, wouldn't it make his father proud? A tunnel of ice came from all sides at Bakugo, rendering him unable to move in any direction temporarily. Bakugo stepped around a little, looking for a possible opening. "Huh? Back to using your ice, Icy Hot?" However, the smirk Todoroki had on his face never had quite left. He raised his left hand to his mouth, igniting his hand while blowing air with his mouth. "My signature. Fireball Jutsu." It was directed straight towards Bakugo, who couldn't escape with his sides surrounded by thick ice that would take Bakugo some time to blast through. He desperately raised his arms to defend, because that was just who he was, someone who would rather die than give up to someone. In any other case, he might have been able to persevere and eventually win, but against Todoroki, this would be his downfall. A drop of nitroglycerin sweat touched the fire. A loud explosion instantly occurred, temporarily throwing Todoroki off, who hadn't been expecting this. Did Bakugo have a plan after all, another trump card to keep their fight going? The smoke cleared, revealing a battered Bakugo with slightly burned arms outside the arena, most of the damage having come from the loud explosion that they both had accidentally set off. Todoroki had won. He had given everyone a flashy fight, and he had given his father the flames. It was over, he thought, along with the instantaneous uproar that came from the crowds, cheering with amazement of how the battle had turned a complete 180 from a boring, basic fight to one that would be told over and over again for many years. Todoroki had won. The aftermath was relatively quick. Bakugo had luckily woke up quickly. Todoroki had been scared for a while that he might have gone too far with his battle with Bakugo, possibly soon facing legal repercussions. This wasn't a real mission or anything. This was a technically friendly spar between two students. Tokoyami and Ida were supposed to get third, although Ida had to leave for something. Bakugo grudgingly stood, quietly for once, at the second-place podium, while Todoroki stood in the first place. The first place that he would use to get back on track with his life instead of being a goalless child, wasting his years away. He would become a true shinobi hero, one that he was meant to be from BR. All Might was giving out the medals as the #1 hero, quite obviously. He leaned in to say something though. I believe that your moves were risky, but all that ends well does. Congratulations, Shuto Todoroki. All Might was doubting him too much. He was strong, stronger than many would ever imagine. I have more control over my quirk than you might think. All Might, taken aback, gave a little shake of his head that Todoroki couldn't quite discern if it was a yes or a no. It didn't really matter, Todoroki supposed. He didn't need All Might's approval. Bakugo never had been in complete danger of his fire either, as Todoroki could have easily receded the fire at a quick speed if Bakugo really had been in any real danger. He just hadn't accounted that Bakugo's sweat had been, well, explodable with his fire. It would just add up to Bakugo's experience anyway. It had ended okay too. The crowds cheered one last time before they walked back out of the stadium, silence enveloping them. Soon enough, the door of the classroom was right in front of them, and Todoroki rolled it open. All of his classmates turned and stared at them, the silence elongating, Todoroki desperate for someone to break it. Good fight, icy hot. Todoroki turned to look at Bakugo incredulously, who shifted his balance a little. Todoroki smiled, which some classmates gasped at. Oh my gosh, he smiled for real this time. How could he look so appealing and be so strong at the Esidash? Do you know where you stand now, Bakugo? Bakugo's eyes widened, filling with pure anger and taking a step toward Todoroki before seeing Present Mike temporarily step inside the classroom, searching through a few files. Bakugo's hands shook, no doubt wanting to beat Todoroki up, even if it was going to lead to his loss. Bakugo glared at him one last time before plopping down on his seat, not wanting to try anything with Present Mike in the room. The breaths his classmates didn't know they were holding were released. Momo bounded up to him with a polite smile on her face. Todoroki-san, that was an amazing battle right there. You seem to use many tactics along with your quirk. Todoroki nodded. She probably meant his technique of throwing Bakugo. It wasn't too hard to execute though, with a bit of practice. Also, in the cavalry battle, you created a knife and used it with great accuracy. Todoroki nodded again. He strangely had the urge to tell Momo that it had been a kunai, although he decided against it. It didn't make a big difference anyway. You also seem to do very well in class, although I also do pretty well in academics too. Todoroki didn't really know where this was going with all these compliments. The last time someone complimented him so much was with Sakura, back when they were he really hoped that there wasn't any deeper meaning behind this. I was wondering if you could teach me how to fight better? I don't really have anything to give back to you, although if you do want something I could certainly do it. Todoroki blinked. Teach Momo? To fight? Was he supposed to be a teacher now? It's okay if you reject. I'm sure you have other things you need to do. I was just wondering if maybe just a little bit. Todoroki stared. What? Train? With you? Momo nodded, a little embarrassed by her request. Todoroki looked down at his feet. Momo was smart. But training with her wouldn't help him out much, would it? Tokoyami looked at the two of them before facing Todoroki, ping his head. You are very strong, Todoroki. You could probably teach everyone in this class a lot. Bakugo suddenly got up before slamming his palm on another desk. No way Icy Hot's going to train you, Ponytail. Bakugo slammed his palm down into a desk, nearly breaking it. Midoriya opened his mouth, maybe to ask to join them too, except Bakugo effectively shut him off by screaming at the rest of his classmates with his loud voice. Momo positively beamed. He could almost see the sun's rays coming off of her. Maybe we can train together, everyone. It would be an amazing class experience. He hadn't even agreed to train together, hadn't he? Todoroki opened his mouth to tell his classmates that he had agreed to no such thing when Aizawa walked in, ready to teach the class. He sighed. He would have to clear up the misunderstanding later. Now, what was he going to do with all of these agency offers? Todoroki yawned. Aizawa told them that they were considering creating dormitories, which Todoroki supported greatly. It would be nice to live away from home for once. It was around 11:30, but the sports festival had worn him out. Endeavor had merely congratulated him before he had a call for some hero work. He flopped onto the sofa, soon about to go to sleep. He believed he really deserved a break right now. Todoroki closed his eyes, allowing the darkness of sleep to overcome him. A while into sleep, his dreams started blurring with an inky color of blood. Red droplets framed his vision while Shuto Todoroki stood in complete darkness. A violent ripping noise caused him to flinch before falling and falling before hitting the hard ground. With red liquid in his eye, all he could see was red. Shuto Todoroki. Suddenly, for a split second, he could see the ground of their classroom, his vision clear. Every one of his classmates were burnt severely with someone's flames. The entire world was in red and black, similar to Shinjutsu. Todoroki felt like he was going to throw up. He could only see the dead bodies of everyone from the Uchiha clan, his class strewn all over the ground. Such a disappointment. Shuto Todoroki. He turned to see a heavily scarred man looking back at him with blue flames in his hand. Really? Such a disappointment. Screams erupted from every side of him as he fell and fell again, just to land inside the classroom with the corpses, fire, and blood. Such a disappointment. Shuto Todoroki. He gasped, bringing him back to the familiarity of his house, the blood gone. His eyes burned, almost as if he had his Sharingan back. He glanced at the clock in the corner, which read 6:30 a.m. He got up from the couch and stumbled a little, trying to get to the restroom. What had that been? Such a disappointment. Shuto Todoroki. Who had that been? Really? Such a disappointment. Todoroki opened the toilet seat, ready to throw up. But the need to hurl didn't seem to come. The man's flames were blue. Todoroki lifted his left side, looking at his orange fire that steadily burnt brighter and hotter until it changed color into a bright blue, just like the scarred man. Really? Who had that been? Unfortunately, fire quirks were relatively common, but seeing the damage done by the man, this fire quirk was stronger than most fire quirks. It was probably able to parallel his own. He could only see the strewn bodies everywhere, of his classmates that he had just fought and talked to, of his mother and father and cousins that should have had a life in front of them. Cold sweat beaded on his head while Todoroki's breaths became far too heavy and labred. He had just seen his classmates a few hours ago, alive and well. What he had just seen was fake. Fake. Curled up into a ball in his restroom, Todoroki breathed, trying to convince himself that everything he had just seen was fake. At around 7 in the morning, Fuyumi walked out of her room to see Shuto already awake. Shuto, you're already awake. You usually wake up pretty early anyway, but this is the first time you've woken up earlier than me. Shuto blinked before turning to his older sister, who just looked back at him. Shuto. Such a disappointment. Shuto Todoroki. Fuyumi, how many people in the region do you think has a blue fire quirk? Todoroki knew that his father expected him to work with him during his internships, but it couldn't hurt to scroll through his agency offers that were well over the number of he had to admit, Some of these offers were tempting. Some even offered him compensation for just an internship, even though money never really had been a problem for him. His control over his left side was already uncanny and nearly just as strong as Endeavor's, who had over 30 years of professional training with this quirk. Todoroki had needed to start from scratch in this new body, even if he could remember every technique he had learned before. It had just been a matter of remastering things quickly. Did he really need his father's help anymore? He sighed as he rolled his chair back, staring blankly at the computer screen that gleamed brightly inside the dark room, hovering his cursor over Endeavor's agency. There would be plenty of opportunities for different internships in his years to come. He supposed that the first could just start with somewhere familiar. The light click of his mouse reverberated through his room, indicating his decision was made. Momo, who had received quite a few offers, was choosing to intern with Wabami, with Bakugo choosing Best Jeanist. Some of his classmates who hadn't received any agency offers had to choose out of a few hero agencies who were willing to work with them. Midoriya seemed to be considering Gran Torino, while Mineta was thinking of Mountain Lady, although his reasoning seemed less than innocent. You're choosing your father's agency, Todoroki? Todoroki looked up to see Midoriya standing in front of him, peering at him curiously. Yes, I am. Midoriya ped his head a little, thinking. I saw that during your battle with Bakugo, your firepower seemed even stronger than your ice, and with just your right side you had defeated so many of us. Midoriya started to pace the room a little, mumbling quickly about something. Your quirk control must have been a result of a mix between a strong quirk, formal training, and lots of practice. Seeing how good you are with your quirk already, you must have been taught a lot by Endeavor. Your power seems really close to him already even though you're so young. Both fire and ice. Maybe you could make water if you pressed your hands together? So many possibilities. He quickly looked up before waving around his hands wildly. Wait. Sorry for rambling, it's just that I'm going to Gran Torino to learn more about my quirk. Haha, I didn't really get any offers from anyone. He shrugged. Although had beat Midoriya at the sports festival, the guy seemed to have plenty of potential. If he somehow overcame his drawback of breaking his body every second, that was. Endeavor certainly had taught me a lot, and my control over both my quirk and my body is quite good. However, one thing Endeavor has over me is his experience as a hero. I was hoping to get a hold of what internships and hero work might really be with my father. Midoriya's eyes widened a little more with every word he said. Oh wow. Yeah, hero work probably really is foreign to us just yet. You've really thought this out, you're so cool. They both paused in silence for a while before Midoriya walked in circles wildly before mumbling a quick bye and running out the door, leaving Todoroki back at his desk. That was new. Patrols, Todoroki decided, were the worst part of a hero's regime. People mindlessly walked around, watching for crimes that didn't even happen most of the time. The most interesting thing that had happened so far was a cat stuck in a tree. Shudo focus. This will be a large portion of your hero career. Todoroki resisted the urge to roll his eyes, opting to instead nod at Endeavor as approval. While Endeavor's rambling was always hard to listen to, he didn't want to hear it now, especially. Endeavor, please come over here. Todoroki blinked as he looked up from the ground to see a few other pro heroes running up to surround his father. I believe we need your assistance over here. His father nodded, beckoning Todoroki to follow. A ding came from his phone, which Todoroki quickly checked. Midoriya, location sent. Momo, hello? Midoriya? Kaminari, is this an accidental text lol? Tokoyami, I believe so, there are no follow-ups. Todoroki blinked as he stared at the text. A location message? Surely Midoriya wasn't that inept with modern technology. Shudo, we're needed over here. He looked from Endeavor to his phone, torn at what to do. It most likely was an accident, but Todoroki didn't want to take any risks. He quickly turned to one of Endeavor's assistants trailing him, shoving his phone in the man's face. Try checking in on this location. He handed the phone while the man blubbered a little before running off towards the location pin. It probably wasn't anything serious, probably just a misclick, but it was just a precaution in case if they needed help. No. There were strange monsters called Nomus that had entered the city for whatever reason there was. His father was fighting one of them, while Todoroki fended off another. It's Endeavor and his son. Didn't he win the sports festival? Was it really the time to be gossiping when they needed to be evacuating? Todoroki froze the Nomu at its feet before letting a sharp piece of ice pin the Nomu to the wall. It was unfortunate that he couldn't showcase his power like his father, who was a full-fledged hero, who was using his blue flames to make sure the head of a Nomu didn't grow back. Only if he had his license. At the moment, he could only assist Endeavor. Shudo, get back right now. Todoroki turned to see another Nomo fly above them, making him duck down quickly to avoid it. Shudo, send a message back that we see 3 Nomus right now. He nodded before running back to the large group of heroes that were in charge of overseeing the entire crisis. They turned to him immediately with their full attention, seeing he was the son of Endeavor. 3 Nomus with Endeavor right now. They don't seem terribly overpowered, but they're definitely a danger. They nodded, jotting something down on their notes. One of them patted Todoroki on the shoulder lightly. You can rest, Todoroki-san. Or if you're feeling it, down a few blocks is the medical station. Maybe you can help out there. He waved a quick thanks before lightly jogging down the street towards the ambulances. Was he supposed to turn left or right? The bright lights and sounds everywhere made it hard to tell. He turned into another large street that didn't seem like it had the medical station set up. He groaned. He supposed he should have turned left, not right. The faint sounds of something similar to footsteps and crashing caught his right ear. Todoroki turned, following the sound as he walked towards a small alleyway where the sounds of potential battle became louder. He could hear voices talking, he realized as he neared an alleyway. Didn't you say you were going to uphold your brother's honor? Todoroki blinked, peeking past the corner to see Ida, Midoriya, a pro hero, and the assistant he sent, all sprawled in various places over the ground, either struggling or unmoving. Standing above them was a man wielding blades that Todoroki had never seen before. And I will be defeating you, Stain. Ida's eyes seemed so full of hatred, face devoid of the regular orderly fashion he always wore. Stain merely grinned at his words, mocking him, while lifting his blade right above Ida's head. Todoroki snapped out of his moment's shock, letting out a sharp shard of ice at a terrifyingly fast speed towards Stain's hand, quickly disarming him, rendering him unable to attack Ida. Stain growled before looking at the new person who had joined their match. And who do we have here? Stain must have been adept with his blades if he had beaten all 4 of them, including his father's assistant. Endeavor had always valued power over anything else, so the man certainly hadn't been shabby with his quirk. Todoroki didn't know exactly how good Stain was at a battle, but just to get a see of his fighting style, he would lay low for the first few minutes. Todoroki, don't let him get your blood, that's how he stopped us. A blood-related quirk. That at least explained the assortment of knives Stain seemed to have on him. What did Stain do with the blood to activate his quirk? Stain ran at a tremendous speed towards Todoroki while slashing his swords. Todoroki realized that Stain was fast. Faster than he had expected, especially with someone with a blood quirk, but his own years of experience made sure that Todoroki flipped over Stain's second sword safely, landing gracefully on the cement. And what's your reason for not joining the battle earlier, son of Endeavor? This little assistant let it slip to me that you sent him here. Stain pointed the tip of his sword at the unmoving assistant. He was probably trying to unnerve Todoroki. Manipulation was a good tactic if done right. And what's it to you, for attacking students and pro-heroes? Stain grinned widely, his lack of a nose making it even creepier. All these fake heroes out in the world. They need to be stopped. Then why were Midoriya and Ida here? They were still young, still students. Stain had no reason to be hurting them too. It didn't matter. Midoriya had told him that Stain's quirk was related to blood. He had to dodge the blades quickly and get close, which would make the takedown easier, even if there were potential risks involved. Only if he was a full-fledged hero with a license, he would be able to let loose with his quirk. But he was still only a student, and using his quirk in these situations would only punish him. Remember, Do nothing to endanger your hero career of becoming the #1 hero. The law made sure that Todoroki could not use his quirk freely without a license or a registry. Technically, he could use his quirk for self-defense purposes, but even that still had risks of potentially getting fined or receiving a few days in jail. Although, the same rules didn't apply to hand-to-hand fighting. He kicked up the sword Stain had dropped earlier. It had been a while since he had held one. However, when he was younger, he had practiced with it often. Stain was no doubt terrifyingly good with his blades, but he had plenty of training with both Orochimaru and Endeavor. Quirk laws restrict people without licenses like us, Stain. And for one lifetime, I'll follow the law. Todoroki lifted the blade up to his cheek, letting the dim light reflect off, creating a light shimmer underneath his left eye. Midoriya seemed both confused yet determined, continuously trying to move. Ida also seemed to be struggling, although he was unable to show as much movement as Midoriya. Now let's see who's the better swordsman? Stain clicked his abnormally long tongue, glancing back at his classmates before turning back to him. Now, what's making you so confident against me? Don't you know me as the hero killer Stain? He shrugged. Maybe it was time he kept up with the internet. Doesn't ring a bell. You must not be as famous as you think you are. Both Stain and Todoroki didn't waste any time in rushing forward for the first hit. The metallic ring of the two swords clashing with each other echoed so loudly that Todoroki could swear that his father must have also been able to hear it. Stain seemed surprised that he was able to block his hits so quickly and with ease. Both of them struggled for a moment, pushing against each other, before Todoroki suddenly stepped back, causing Stain to temporarily stumble forwards. Todoroki lifted the blade, ready to slice Stain's head off, before stopping himself. Heroes, unlike shinobi, were not supposed to kill. They were to incapacitate and capture instead. Todoroki shifted the blade so that it whacked Stain on the back of his neck with the flat side of the blade, causing Stain to fall forwards. Todoroki looked up to see Midoriya break out of whatever bond Stain had captured Midoriya in. Todoroki, he has more blades. He looked down to see Stain holding the hilt of a knife headed straight at his ankles. Todoroki leaped back, but not quite fast enough. Stain grinned as he held up the knife slightly, a few droplets of Todoroki's blood on the sharp blade. His tongue lapped out, ready to lick the blood off. Stain seemed to have forgotten about Midoriya, however, who was now able to move. Midoriya landed a punch on Stain's hand, making him drop the knife the second before he was able to reach the blood. Stain, who had seemed to realize that he was now on the losing side, started to back away slowly before turning into a full-out sprint. Stain was seriously fast in an abnormal way, even though his quirk shouldn't have gifted him many physical benefits. Even with Midoriya's quirk, which was a physical enhancer, they were having a hard time catching up. No, this is my battle. Todoroki turned, realizing that he had forgotten about Ida. He would need to work on rescuing over battling for his heroics career, he mentally noted. While both Midoriya's and his quirks were not speed-based, Ida's definitely was. While using his engines to catch up to Stain, he grabbed both Todoroki and Midoriya in his arms while sprinting, quickly gaining on Stain. He would probably get chastised over this, Todoroki realized as he started to lift his right hand. If he had known he was going to eventually use his quirk, he would have used it before. But with his father backing him and potentially his classmates, a little quirk use couldn't hurt, could it? Todoroki wiggled a little out of Ida's grip while raising his right hand, letting out a jet of cold ice freeze Stain to the ground. He was probably going to get out of it sooner or later, but this was enough for them to catch up. This is my revenge for my brother, Ingenium. Revenge? What the hell had Ida been thinking, going after a villain? Ida raised his leg while safely dropping both Midoriya and Todoroki nearby before letting his engines loose, hitting Stain on the back of the head, instantly knocking him out with a loud smashing noise. Stain dropped to the ground, unmoving. The three of them breathed heavily from where they stood, making sure that Stain wasn't showing any signs of getting back up anytime soon. Ida dropped to his knees, hysterically laughing. Revenge for my brother, Ingenium. Revenge indeed, Todoroki thought, while he watched Ida's engine sputter before going out. The aftermath was relatively simple for Todoroki. With his father by his side and his classmates' testimonies in his favor, the authorities allowed him to return home nearly right away. He received a warning along with a few compliments on taking down Stain. Ida, Midoriya, his father's assistant and the pro-hero he figured out was named Native stayed for more questioning. Todoroki had to admit he was worried for Ida. Midoriya had entered into the fight to defend Ida, so he most likely wouldn't be charged with any serious issues, but Ida's case was far more severe. Endeavor's glare bore into his face on the car ride home, and he knew exactly what was coming. What you did today was terribly reckless. We cannot have you compromising your hero career before it even starts. Todoroki fidgeted a little. He always felt a little small before Endeavor no matter how close the difference between their strength was. The car soon pulled up into their house, and Todoroki entered their home with Endeavor harshly pushing him to the dojo. I suppose I'll congratulate you on remembering the law, although loosely, and successfully taking down Stain. We'll need to work a little more on your reflexes though, right? Todoroki nodding, looking down at the clotted wound on his ankle while opening the door of the training room. He moved to one corner while his father moved to the other. Facing his father made a loose sense of nervousness rose inside him, but Todoroki forced it down. It would only hinder his performance. His father raised a hand ignited with fire, while Todoroki shifted, ready to dodge any second. Remember, you're training to become the #1 hero. Todoroki had to admit, the training session was probably one of his worst performances. The fireballs had been relentless, and without chakra running through his feet, he wasn't quite as agile anymore. He winced while he tightly wrapped the burns around his middle and arms. The bandaging was somewhat crude. Usually, Fuyumi would help him wrap up his wounds after particularly harsh sessions with his father. Luckily, they weren't in places that were hard to hide, and his uniform would cover up most of the bandages and wounds. It gave him a nice marking, though, of where his progress was. He would need to work harder, he realized, if he was going to become #1. It was a good thing, he supposed, that he had chosen his father for the internship. If there was anyone that knew him well, it was his father. Todoroki could always depend on him to point out his flaws. He flipped over in his bed and sighed. Tomorrow he would go visit Midoriya and Ida to make sure they were all right. It would be a great time to have some change with something to look forward to. Todoroki woke up with pains and sores all over his body. It hurt, but it wasn't something he couldn't handle. He winced slightly as he got up to go downstairs for his breakfast. Fuyumi wasn't home today, so he was on his own. He settled for some simple onigiri he could make in mere minutes. He was already running short on time for the hospital visiting hours, so he needed to hurry up if he wanted time to chat with them. Shuto. With a half-eaten onigiri in his mouth, Todoroki turned to face his father, who was looking down at him with his overwhelming height. For once, though, his father didn't look angry. His face looked more thoughtful. You're late, aren't you? Todoroki nodded before wincing again at a particularly sore spot underneath his ribs. Endeavor paused a moment, thinking. Your performance last night was less than what I usually expect of you. I want a better training session next time. Todoroki already knew this. Last night was disappointing, nowhere near acceptable if he was going to become a hero. If he could, he would have most likely spent the entirety of the weekend honing his hand-to-hand combat and agility. But today was a special day. He needed to know what the verdict was for each of his classmates. I promise I'll do better next time. Endeavor nodded before moving out of the way for Todoroki to bound out the door with a glint in his eye. Shuto, are you close friends with either of the two in the hospital? Todoroki stopped for a moment before shaking his head. He was roughly acquaintances, he supposed, if he put a label to their relationship. Maybe he was slightly closer to Midoriya than Ida, but not quite close enough for friendship. We're just classmates at the moment. Why do you ask? Endeavor shrugged, but Todoroki could swear he grimaced slightly. If his father was the one doing so, something was very, very wrong. Endeavor, seeing the terrified look in Todoroki's eyes, shook his head. The two are in decent health, no need to worry about that. But just be ready for what they may tell you. His father's words had certainly been ominous. They were technically alive and well. What more could he need? The automatic doors of the hospital scooted open slowly, the inside of the building snow white. A few people were waiting for something down in the main reception. Todoroki supposed he was also supposed to check in there, for Midoriya and Ida. The lady stationed there looked up at him and nodded even before he said anything. She pulled up a few files, clicking away with her mouse before writing his name on a card. Shuto Todoroki. Here for Midoriya and Ida, correct. He nodded. Being recognized in public did invade his privacy often, but in some situations, being somewhat famous brought in benefits. The receptionist explained the directions while handing him the visitor's card while Todoroki listened intently. Do you remember the directions well enough? He nodded, and the lady seemed to be satisfied, allowing him to leave to visit his classmates. Todoroki lightly ran his fingertips against the wall, feeling a little bump every few seconds. Midoriya and Ida's room was only a few more doors away. Todoroki took a deep breath, remembering what his father told him. Be ready for what they may tell you. Todoroki slapped himself on the face. Surely neither of them were going to die, were they? It was the worst news he could think of. The door rolled open so abruptly that Todoroki jumped back a foot or so, before landing lightly on his toes. Ah, Shuto Todoroki. Here to visit your classmates? 3 men he didn't recognize were emerging from the room, one person who looked quite old, another with a scuba diving outfit, and a final person who seemed to have a mutant-type quirk that gave them the appearance of a dog. Todoroki nodded a little. These men were no doubt people high in authority. It wouldn't do him any good if he set them off. I believe that you can visit them right now. They might have something to tell you. Todoroki nodded once more, confused and afraid for Ida and Midoriya. What was it that they had to tell him? Why was everyone being so secretive? The 3 men walked away, the scuba diver waving goodbye at him. He looked at them for a moment before turning back to the door. He was curious, but terrified of the truth that everyone seemed to be hiding from him. If they were in fine health, what was so worrisome? Todoroki peered into the room, pushing the door open only slightly, but Midoriya noticed anyway. Todoroki, did you come to visit us? He nodded, fully entering the room while closing it lightly behind him. Midoriya smiled a little, but Ida was still hidden by the curtains. Or maybe he wasn't there at all, but that was unlikely. Ida? Todoroki is here. The curtain covering a bed pulled back with a screech, Ida's eyes meeting Todoroki's for a second or so before Ida dipped his head down, facing the ground. That was strange in itself, and Todoroki opened his mouth to ask Ida why he seemed so down, what exactly the adults were keeping from him, and if they were okay. But the look in Midoriya's eyes was telling Todoroki to drop it, so reluctantly he did. Ida could tell him when he wanted to. Midoriya made a nervous little laugh before turning to Todoroki. Are you okay? I'm sure they only sent you home because you weren't injured, and you barely even used your quirk and it was to save us anyway, so no charges would have been pressed. Oh yeah, you also used it to capture Stain, and without that we might have never caught Stain. I'm here because I was injured quite a bit, I guess. No charges against me either, ha. Midoriya whacked his head on the bed, much to Todoroki's surprise. I need to stop rambling sometimes, don't you think? Todoroki shrugged before thinking. There really was nothing wrong with Midoriya's endless talking. In fact, Midoriya's ideas seemed very nice overall. You don't have to. I find it fine. You have very good ideas that I wouldn't mind listening to. Midoriya's eyes widened before burning his face in his hands, ears rapidly turning red, staying in that position for a while. Todoroki stood awkwardly, eyes flitting to Midoriya's embarrassed figure to Ida, who most definitely had something important on his mind. Perhaps he should have brought some gifts. It could have lessened the tension. Midoriya looked up again once his flush was mostly gone, a little smile on his face. It's just that a lot of people found it weird when I was a kid. You really don't find it weird? Todoroki shook his head. Perhaps he wouldn't want to listen to Midoriya all day long, but he seemed to have interesting ideas. Midoriya smiled a little, happiness sky high while opening his mouth a little to perhaps ask Todoroki another question. Ida suddenly stood up abruptly for a second or so before sitting down again. Todoroki and Midoriya blinked, staring at Ida. Midoriya gave a few soft words of encouragement, to perhaps speak up. Ida sighed before turning around, pulling back the curtains so that he could look at Todoroki straight in the eyes. Todoroki, I apologize for not thanking you earlier. Without you too, I would have not made it out alive, most likely. It was foolish of me to think I could defeat Stain. Ida took a deep breath, fighting a little, which was a strange sight. I had gone after Stain for not so heroic reasons. My actions, unlike both of you, were looked badly upon by the law. Todoroki blinked, eyes widening. So the problems Ida was facing weren't based on his health, they were legal issues instead. Ida caught Todoroki's shocked face and grimaced. Luckily, I'm not going to prison, if that's what you're thinking. Todoroki almost sighed with relief, instead opting to allow his face to relax a bit, still giving Ida his full attention. Ida still looked as if he had things he wanted to say. However, I will be watched for a while, and I believe I will not be allowed to ever receive a hero's license. I won't be able to become a hero anymore. I might even drop out of UA. Sheet, that wasn't good news. Todoroki knew that Ida's family was somewhat like his, a family of heroes. It was most likely that he was expected, maybe even told to become a hero since he was young. And now, he wouldn't ever be able to become one, unable to pass on his family's heroics line. The situation truly SCKD. The air inside the room immediately chilled, silence overcoming them, the only sound inside the room being the ticking of the clock. Midoriya looked nervously at both Ida and Todoroki, while Todoroki just stood there, at a loss at what to say. Comforting people had never been his strong point. Fighting people was. It was often the job of his sister, Fuyumi. What was he supposed to say? That he was sorry for Ida's loss? Was that what people said to each other? But Ida most likely had already heard that many times today, perhaps from Midoriya or his family. Todoroki wanted to say something unique but also something that wouldn't offend Ida either. Todoroki? Are you in here? Todoroki turned to see that the door of the hospital had been opened by a nurse who lightly beckoned him over. I'm sorry, visiting hours are over. You can come back again tomorrow. Todoroki wanted to both sigh in relief and run away from the suffocating air right away, but that would seem rude. He looked back at Midoriya who lightly waved goodbye and Ida who gave him a little nod. Todoroki swallowed. Communication had never been his strong suit, but he could try. Do you want me to maybe visit again? Tomorrow? Midoriya smiled but shook his head. I think we have stuff to take care of. But thanks for visiting today anyway. Todoroki turned to Ida, biting his lip a little due to nervousness. He really didn't know what to say, did he? Ida. I'm sorry. I really wish that we could have both earned our licenses together. Ida shrugged a little. I believe I should have been aware of my actions beforehand. I'll take this punishment and be grateful it wasn't more. Thank you for visiting. Todoroki gave them a little smile and a wave of his own before turning back to the nurse and the door. He walked out, back into the crystal white hallway of the hospital. He supposed it could have gone worse. The punching bag in his room was flailing around, unable to rest due to Todoroki's blows. Seeing the hero killer a few nights ago showed how weak he truly was. All Might had been untouchable, undefeatable by even the strongest adversaries, while he was still down here, being cut by one measly villain. He was always going to be outshined by others, wasn't he? By All Might, by Stain, by Itachi Endeavor. He was still pretty pathetic, Todoroki realized. Winning the sports festival didn't mean anything if he couldn't perform well in the real world. A ding came from his phone, catching Todoroki's attention. It was a group chat, created by his teacher, Aizawa. Shoyuta Aizawa added Izuka Midoriya, Ochako Uraraka, Fumikage Tokoyami, and 17 others to the group chat. Aizawa, this is a temporary group chat, mainly because we forgot something to do in class. Aizawa, we forgot to do your hero names, so send them here to make it official. Kaminari, oh my gosh, hero names? That's so cool. Zero, yeah, I can't freaking wait to see everyone's. Aizawa, stay on topic, send no extraneous messages. Aoyama, I have mine already, Mansoor. Aoyama, it is I cannot stop twinkling. Aizawa, okay. Sure. Yima, I cannot stop twinkling. Aoyama, oh, very very nice. Kaminari, oh epic. Kaminari, mine next. I propose mine to be. Drumroll please. Suro, drums. Kirishima, drum noises. Kaminari, thank you. Kaminari, charge bolt. Aizawa, Kaminari, charge bolt. Suro, mine is cellophane. Aizawa, Suro, cellophane. Kirishima, wow, epic names honestly. Midoriya, fine. I'm not sure what I want mine to be though. Can I have more time to think? Aizawa, get it to me in a week. Afterwards, I'm just setting yours to Midoriya. Kaminari, ha nice. Kirishima, I want mine to be Red Riot. Tokoyami, that is a cool name. Aizawa, Kirishima, Red Riot. Tokoyami, mine is Tsukoyami. Aizawa, Tokoyami, Tsukoyami. Momo, oh, I didn't see this chat till now. Uraraka, oh yes, same. Uraraka, hero names? Azui, I've had one I've been thinking of since I was young. It's Froppy. Uraraka, oich cute. Mina, cute. Dizawa, Azui Froppy. Mina, I want mine to be. Ailin Queen. Aizawa, Mina, what's wrong? Aizawa, Midnight is looking over my shoulder and says you can't do it. Aizawa, whatever. Mina, Ailin Queen. Mina, hi. Uraraka, nice. I propose mine to be Uravity. Aizawa, Uraraka Uravity. Momo, I would like mine to be Creati. Aizawa, Momo Creati. Jiro, oh what's this chat? Mina, Hi Jiru. Oh hero names. Jiru, I would like mine to be Earphone Jack. Aizawa, Earphone Jack. Mineta, Grape Juice. Jiro, who let him here? Aizawa, I mean he is a student. Aizawa, Mineta, Grape Juice. Shoji, oh these are all nice hero names. Shoji, I would like mine to be Tentacle. Kaminari, cool. Aizawa, Shoji Tentacle. Hagakure, I really like Tentacle. Shoji, thank you. Hagakure, mine is Invisible Girl. Uraraka, Fancy. Aizawa, Hagakure, Invisible Girl. Wajiro, that's a very nice name Hagakure. Hagakure, thank you. Wajiro, I would like mine to be Tailman. Aizawa, Wajiro, Tailman. Kuda, all of your names are so good. I think I would like mine to be Anima. Aizawa, Kuda, Anima. Jiru, cool name Kuda. Momo, yes, all of your names are great so far. Azui, I think we have Satu, Ida, Bakugo, and Todoroki left now. Midoriya, Ida's going to do it later. He's still thinking. Azui, oh cool. Satu, Bakugo, and Todoroki. Satu, mine is quite simple. Sugarman. Azui, nice. Aizawa, Satu Sugarman. Aizawa, where is Bakugo and Todoroki? Kirishima, let's spam them. Jiru, please no. Aizawa, Kaminari. Kuda, I believe they will get on when they see this message. Hopefully it's soon. Bakugo, who the f... Aizawa, no cussing Bakugo. Suro, Bakugo. Bakugo, hero names? Bakugo, Lord Explosion Murder. Momoto, how creative. Kaminari, I don't think that'll work Bakugo. Bakugo, who says? Aizawa, Bakugo, maybe we can tone it down a little. Bakugo, what's so Bakugo. Aizawa, don't cuss, and you have a week's time. Bakugo, why not Lord Explosion Mercer? Bakugo, murder. Aizawa, sorry no. Bakugo. Kaminari, no cussing. Aizawa, Todoroki, are you here? Todoroki. Momo, hello Todoroki. Todoroki, hi Momo. Kaminari, hero name quick. Todoroki, hero name? Todoroki. Azui, have you never thought of one? Before. Todoroki, yeah, I just realized it's never crossed my brain before. Suro, W. Todoroki, perhaps just Shudo would be sufficient. Kugo, boring. Bakugo, I bet you can't F-beat mine. Bakugo, Lord Explosion Murder. Aizawa, no Lord Explosion Murder Bakugo. Todoroki, give me some time to think Bakugo. Jiro, oh, those two are at it again. Tokoyami, They do seem to do so quite a bit. Yima, entertaining, right? Visual, maybe. Todoroki. Todoroki, I got it. Kirishima, yeah? Tell us. Tokoyami, will Todoroki beat Bakugo in hero names? Hagakure, let's see. Todoroki, a somewhat tribute to my parents. Todoroki, Hellfrost. Midoriya, Zero, wait, that's epic. Izawa, Todoroki Hellfrost. True. Bakugo, what's yours? Bakugo, shut up and let me think. Izawa, deadline is a week. Bakugo, Kaminari, no Osenji. Todoroki sighed. He had come up with a few hero names before, Hellfrost, but they all were unsatisfactory. He was thinking of Hellfrost and Frostflame, using his father's Hellflame and his mother's Frostbite. However, he had to admit that his father's quirk, Hellflame, was far more well known than his mother's quirk. Putting it first in his name would immediately allow people to recognize him. Although he did have to wonder, would his father be satisfied with the hero name he had come up with? His phone dinged again, presumably from the class chat, but when Todoroki looked at the notification, it was from a different group chat. A group chat with Momo, Bakugo, and himself. Yaoyorozu Momo added Katsuki Bakugo and Shuto Todoroki to the group chat. Momo, hello. I was just wondering if any of you guys are free tomorrow to train. Bakugo, what is this? I'm not going anywhere with you guys. Todoroki, oh hello. Todoroki, yes, I am free. Momo, great. Bakugo, are you not going? Bakugo, fuck why? Momo, is that a no? Bakugo, I'll go, oh my gosh. Todoroki, no caps for once. Bakugo, you're on thin ice. Momo, here's my address. We have a large training room that I believe will be sufficient. Todoroki, thank you Momo. Say thank you Bakugo. Bakugo, shut up. Todoroki smiled. At least he had something to look forward to tomorrow. Now, what would he practice with them?